Hello and welcome. In this lecture, we will introduce FormValidation IO, understand what are the alternatives, understand why FormValidation IO makes sense, install the library in our DevOps Buddy application, set up form validation on a couple of forms. As an exercise, you will be asked to add validation to the login form. Before going any further, I want to be clear on a point. This library requires a commercial license. If you don't want to purchase it, please keep watching the video and I'll show you a couple of alternatives. However, in this course we will be using the FormValidation IO library. As we will see in a minute, the commercial license is quite cheap. So what is FormValidation IO? FormValidation IO, available at FormValidation IO, is a JavaScript and CSS library that offers an easy way to add validation to our Bootstrap forms. As briefly mentioned, it's a commercial product. At the time of this video, the lifetime commercial license for a developer costs $25 and the lifetime organization license costs $75. Now, I don't know how much your time costs per hour, but assuming a $400 daily rate, that's equivalent to 30 minutes of your time. This library will pay for itself probably after applying it to the first couple of forms. Additionally, by using this library, we are being true to the dry principle, which, if you remember, means don't repeat yourself. So what if you don't want to spend this money? There are a couple of alternatives. Of course, you could write a JavaScript jQuery validation library by yourself. This is likely to be time-consuming and buggy, at least at the beginning. The FormValidation IO undergoes heavy automated and continuous testing to make sure it works as it should. A second alternative is that you could use the jQuery validation plugin. This could be a good compromise. However, as a good open source citizen, you should contribute a little sum to the project. And this library doesn't natively support the Bootstrap validation elements, so the user experience wouldn't be as good. Ultimately, the choice is yours. In this course, we will be using the FormValidation IO, but you are free to use what you want, or nothing at all. If we don't add form validation, you will still be able to progress with the rest of the course, although you will need to add some checks if you intend to use these website skeletons for commercial products of yours. In summary, FormValidation IO provides the following advantages. It is relatively cheap to buy. As you will soon see, it provides amazing features out of the box. It's customizable, which means you can write your own rules too. It makes Bootstrap forms look beautiful, enhancing the user experience. It provides support for Bootstrap out of the box. Bootstrap provides a set of elements to support form validation. To know more, you can visit the Bootstrap website at getbootstrap.com, then select CSS, Forms, and look for validation states and validation with optional icons. From this point on, I'll assume that you want to progress with this library. So now, please pause the video and purchase this library. Once you have received the purchase confirmation email with the download link, please resume this video. First, we will create a new feature branch called validation, where we will place all of the validation code. We can start by ensuring we are pointing at a develop branch with the git command git checkout develop. Then, we will create a new validation feature branch with the git commands git checkout -b validation, git push -u origin validation. At this point, you should have a zip file named form validation developer license v0.zip or similar in your file system. If you unzip it, the folder will contain your license as a PDF file and the form validation this v0.7.1 or similar folder. If you look inside this folder, you will find dist and the source folder. Within the dist folder, you will find the CSS and the JS folder. From the CSS folder, we copy the form validation.mean.css file under the source main resources template static CSS folder. From the JS folder, we copy the form validation.mean.js file under the source main resources templates static JS folder. Under the JS folder, you will find a framework folder. We will copy the bootstrap.min.js file under the static.js folder. Now, we will add the links to the form validation CSS and JavaScript files in the header.html file. Please note that the order in which we declare these files is important. We will add a link element under the definition of our custom styles.css file, which points to the form validation.min.css. Then, at the bottom of the file, we will add two script elements pointing at, in order, FormValidation.min.js and Bootstrap.min.js. Also, please do not confuse the Bootstrap.min.js webjar with the file that we have just declared. The former comes from Bootstrap, the latter from Form Validation. Again, please ensure that the Form Validation.js file is declared before the Bootstrap.min.js file, or the validation won't work. I'm now going to show you a slide of how your header.html page should look like after you have declared the form validation library. Okay, now we are ready to go. We will start by adding validation to the contact form. First, we can open the DevOpsBuddy.js file under the template static.js folder. Next, I'm going to copy the code I prepared for this lecture, and then I will talk you through it. The way we use the form validation library is through jQuery. You will recall from the introductory lecture on jQuery that this library works with handlers. If you open the contact.html page, you will notice that the form element has the ID attribute set to contact form. In our JavaScript file, therefore, we are asking jQuery to invoke the form validation method on this form. This method is part of the form validation library. Then, we pass three arguments to this method. The framework attribute, set to Bootstrap, because we want to use this library with Bootstrap. An icon object that defines the Bootstrap classes to use for when a form element is valid, invalid, or being validated. Finally, a fields object containing a collection of form elements and the rules to apply for their validation. The format of each element in the fields object is the following. First, we declare the form input type name. In our case, in the contact form, the email input type has got the name attribute email, and that's why we see email as the field name. Then, we declare a collection of validators. In the email case, we are using a notEmpty and an email address validator. For each validator, we can define a message to display to the user when that field is not correct. The notEmpty validator does what it says on the tin. It makes sure that the input field is empty. The email address validator makes sure that the value entered is a valid email address. This is how the form validator library works. It offers a set of validators that we can apply to form input fields to apply the most common validations. Later on in the course, we will see how we can use credit card validators to make sure users enter a valid credit card number. For a complete list of validators and how they work, please refer to the FormValidation.io online documentation. It's pretty comprehensive. For all other fields in the form, we just make sure that they are not empty. If we restart the application now, visit the Contact Us page, and try pressing the Submit button, we will see the Form Validation IO magic in action. It does look beautiful, doesn't it? We can also try to enter an invalid email address and see what happens while we do this. As you can see, the error message changes from the email is required to the input is not a valid email address. This is also great, and it doesn't allow users to submit the form unless they've entered valid information. We will now add another couple of validations for the Forgot My Password journey. We want to make sure that on the email form page, the email is not empty and that is valid. Also, we want to make sure that on the Change Password page, the passwords are not empty and they match. Let's see how we can do this. I'm now going to copy the code that I've prepared for this lecture, and then I'll talk you through it. I'll skip the mandatory email, as we have already explained how this works in the previous example. I'll concentrate instead on the change password form. Here, we are defining two fields, password and confirm password. As a reminder, these names must match the name attribute that we have defined in the form. Apart from the notEmpty validator that we have already discussed, here we are using the identical validator. For the password field, we are defining that its value must be identical to the confirm password value. And for the confirm password field, in the identical validator, we are defining that its value must be identical to the password value. If we restart the application now and go through the Forgot My Password journey, we can see this validation in action. If I start typing a value in the password field, immediately I can see the error message that says the password and its confirmation are not the same. Notice how the Save New Password button is disabled while there is an error on the form. This provides a great user experience and it allows our application only to deal with the correct data. As an exercise, I'd like you to add validation to the login form. Both username and password should not be empty. Now, we can close the Git flow workflow. First, we will push the local code remotely with the git commands git add star, git commit -m added form validation, and git push. Then, we will merge to the develop branch with the git commands git checkout develop, git merge validation, and finally git push. In this lecture, we have learned how to use the form validation library to validate our Bootstrap forms to provide both a compelling user experience and data integrity. In the next lecture, we will start the journey to create basic and pro accounts. As part of this journey, we will store users' profile images to Amazon S3 by creating an S3 service. Thank you for your time, and I see you in the next lecture.